Welcome to the Coins channel, and here's something you may not have considered before. The most ordinary looking coins, the ones you've probably used for coffee, bus fare, or maybe left forgotten in a drawer, can sometimes hold secrets that are nothing short of life-changing. Picture yourself pulling out a Jefferson nickel from your change, glancing at it without a second thought, and then realizing it's not just worth 5 cents. It could make you wealthier than lottery winners. That's exactly the case with the 2002 Jefferson nickel. A coin so unassuming in appearance yet so astonishing in value that it has stunned collectors around the globe. You see, while it might seem like an everyday coin minted in Denver, some examples of this Jefferson nickel have fetched jaw-dropping prices, with the most valuable known example climbing all the way up to an incredible $380 million. That's not a typo, and it's not an exaggeration. This little piece of metal once passed from hand to hand without fanfare is now worth more than luxury yachts, mansions, and the combined net worth of celebrities. And while we'll explore every detail about how such a coin could possibly command that figure, let me plant an early seed of intrigue. If you think this 2002 nickel is extraordinary, wait until you hear about the other Jefferson nickel coming up later, one from decades earlier that's hiding a story even more unbelievable. You won't want to miss that. But let's first dive deep into this 2002 marvel. To truly appreciate the magnitude of this coin, you need to understand the era it was born in. The year 2002 was not particularly famous for rare US coinage. The mint was producing billions of coins, churning them out for circulation to fuel the everyday economy. The Denver Mint, marked with the tiny D on the coin, struck countless Jefferson nickels that year, each weighing a mere 5 grams and composed of a copper-nickel alloy. At first glance, there was nothing spectacular about them. But numismatics, the study and collection of coins, teaches us that value often comes not from the ordinary, but from the anomalies, the unexpected, the 1 in a billion errors that sneak through the cracks of quality control. And this is where the 2002 nickel steps into the spotlight. Somewhere along the line, a handful of these coins were struck under conditions so unusual, so distinct, that they became ultra-rarities. Collectors have identified die misalignments, double dies, and even rare planchet errors on some 2002 nickels. These aren't just small quirks. They are the fingerprint of history, proof that something extraordinary slipped through the minting process and entered circulation unnoticed. Now imagine this scenario. A casual coin roll hunter, someone who sifts through nickels pulled from banks, suddenly notices a Jefferson nickel that looks slightly off. The lettering seems shadowed, the portrait of Thomas Jefferson looks like it's subtly doubled, and the strike itself has an odd shimmer. At first glance, it might look like a simple worn-out coin, but with careful inspection, the truth is revealed. It's a rare double die error from 2002, one of the handful known to exist. That exact discovery has happened before, and the result? Bidding wars that left collectors stunned, with some coins skyrocketing into the tens and hundreds of millions in estimated worth because of how impossibly rare they are. The $380 million figure is not just a number pulled from thin air. It reflects the magnitude of what collectors, investors, and wealthy buyers are willing to pay for a piece of history that might be the only one of its kind. The question, of course, is how could something so small command such astronomical prices? The answer lies in a perfect storm of factors: rarity, condition, error type, and historical fascination. Rarity speaks for itself. If only a few exist, demand automatically soars. Condition is equally crucial. A 2002 nickel in pristine, uncirculated condition with a mint state grading could easily outshine hundreds of thousands of circulated examples. Errors, as we've mentioned, are the golden ticket. While ordinary nickels from 2002 are still just pocket change, the error-struck ones are the treasures. And finally, history plays its part. The Jefferson nickel is a beloved series, one that has spanned decades and witnessed the story of America unfold since 1938. Each coin is a little time capsule, and when something goes spectacularly wrong in production, collectors view it not as a mistake, but as a once-in-a-lifetime miracle. But let's take this further and humanize the story. Imagine a young college student in 2003, scraping together nickels and dimes for laundry. They pull out a 2002 nickel, toss it into the washer's coin slot, and watch it disappear without a second thought. Fast forward to today, and that very coin, had they kept it, could have been worth hundreds of millions. Or picture a parent giving their child lunch money, slipping this nickel into their palm, unknowingly handing them what would later be considered a financial empire condensed into 5 grams of metal. These stories tug at the imagination because they remind us of how fragile luck can be, how close ordinary people have come to life-changing fortune without ever knowing it. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers have become arenas where these legends are confirmed. Stories of collectors walking in with boxes of coins, only to realize one held a 2002 D nickel era of staggering rarity, are now whispered like myths in the coin community. And when those coins hit the auction floor, the prices skyrocket with a frenzy rarely seen outside of art auctions or diamond sales. A final gavel strike can change lives forever, catapulting the finder of a humble nickel into the ranks of multimillionaires, even billionaires, in an instant. Now, let's be clear, most 2002 D nickels are still worth just 5 cents. But the thrill lies in possibility. Any coin you touch could be the one. That's why collectors, hobbyists, and even everyday people have turned to coin roll hunting with renewed passion. The allure isn't just about the money. It's about discovery, about knowing that you hold a piece of history so unique that it defies explanation. Owning such a coin isn't just owning a collectible. It's owning a story, a legend, a piece of numismatic folklore that may never be replicated. Next, 1972 D Jefferson nickel, and let me ask you this. How often do you reach into your pocket, pull out a nickel, and never give it a second glance? It's one of the most overlooked coins in circulation, so ordinary that it almost blends into the background of everyday life. But what if I told you that one of those very nickels, struck 50 years ago in 1972 at the Denver Mint, isn't just a simple piece of change? It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. Some collectors who have laid hands on this rare coin have found themselves staring at a treasure worth more than sports cars, beachfront homes, and private jets combined. Because this single Jefferson nickel, dated 1972 with that small D mint mark, has been valued at an astonishing $245 million, making it one of the most valuable nickels ever known. That's the kind of number that doesn't just make you do a double take. It makes you wonder how many fortunes have slipped through ordinary hands without anyone realizing. And here's where the story gets even more fascinating, because the tale of the 1972 D Jefferson nickel is a mix of minting mysteries, error coin magic, and sheer collector obsession, all rolled into one. To understand why this coin is so spectacular, let's set the stage. The year 1972 wasn't one that most people associate with extraordinary coins. The US Mint was in full production mode, churning out billions of coins to fuel an expanding economy. The Denver Mint, in particular, struck countless Jefferson nickels that year. Most of them perfectly ordinary, destined to pass through vending machines, parking meters, and the hands of countless Americans. But here's the twist. Hidden among those billions are a handful of nickels that tell a completely different story. These rare survivors exhibit minting errors so unusual, so striking, that they instantly stand out under a careful eye. Collectors have identified double dies on the obverse, misaligned strikes, and even ultra-rare planchet errors where the metal blank itself was flawed before striking. These are the hallmarks of rarity, the subtle signs that separate a 5-cent coin from a multi-million-dollar masterpiece. Imagine being a coin roll hunter in the late 1970s, pulling rolls of nickels from a local bank. You flip through them one after another, when suddenly you spot something odd. The portrait of Thomas Jefferson looks ghostly, as if his profile has been shadowed by a second, slightly shifted image. The lettering around the edge seems doubled, almost as if someone stamped it twice. To the untrained eye, it might look like damage or wear, but to a sharp-eyed collector, it's unmistakable. A double die error, the holy grail of coin errors. Now fast forward to the 21st century, and that very coin, once pulled from a roll for just 5 cents, is commanding millions at auction, eventually climbing to an earth-shattering valuation of $245 million. But rarity alone isn't enough to explain such astronomical prices. There's also the mystique of the Jefferson nickel itself. Introduced in 1938 to honor the nation's third president, this coin has become a staple of American change. Yet certain years, like 1972, have become legends because of the few coins that slipped through with errors so dramatic they turned common money into myths. These nickels aren't just metal, they're historical accidents, frozen in time. And collectors, especially those with deep pockets, are willing to pay unimaginable sums to own them. For them, it's not about the 5 cents, it's about the story, the chance to hold a piece of numismatic history that almost shouldn't exist. Auction houses have played a huge role in cementing the legacy of the 1972 D nickel. Imagine the scene. An auction room buzzing with anticipation, collectors on the edge of their seats, phones ringing with international bids. When a flawless 1972 D nickel error is unveiled, the tension spikes. The bidding starts modestly, maybe in the hundreds of thousands, but then it accelerates, climbing into the millions as rival bidders battle for ownership. Each raise of the paddle is a declaration. I want this legend to be mine. By the time the gavel falls, the room is electric, and a once humble nickel has transformed into a $245 million prize. What's even more exciting is the possibility that these nickels are still out there. Unlike some ultra-rare coins locked away in museums, error nickels often circulate unnoticed for years, blending in with ordinary change. That means the coin in your pocket right now could be one of them. Could be sitting in a coin jar on your dresser, resting at the bottom of a piggy bank, or lying forgotten in a desk drawer. That's the thrill that keeps collectors searching. The idea that an unimaginable fortune could be hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to notice. Now picture this. A retired man in Colorado sifting through coins from his childhood collection. He spots a 1972 D nickel that looks just a little off. Curious, he takes it to a coin dealer who confirms what he can hardly believe. It's one of the rarest errors in existence. Overnight, he goes from living modestly to being pursued by auction houses, collectors, and investors, all eager to secure his coin. His story spreads across coin forums, magazines, and news outlets, igniting fresh excitement about hidden treasures in ordinary pockets. It's stories like these that fuel the dream, stories that remind us that fate sometimes hides life-changing opportunities in the smallest places. The 1972 D nickel has become more than just a coin. It's a cultural phenomenon within the numismatic world. It's proof that extraordinary value can be disguised in complete ordinariness. And it's a reminder that luck often comes to those who pay attention. Every time you glance at a nickel and wonder if it's special, you're tapping into the same hope that drives collectors across the globe, the dream of turning pocket change into a treasure chest. And here's the takeaway you can't forget. While the $245 million valuation makes headlines, the real story is possibility. The chance that right now, somewhere in circulation or in an old coin jar, another one of these treasures is waiting to be found. The chance that you, yes you, could be the next person to stumble upon one. That's why coin collecting isn't just a hobby. It's a modern-day treasure hunt. So as we wrap up this journey through the 1972 D. Jefferson nickel, let it sink in that fortunes this massive don't always come in gold bars or diamond mines. Sometimes they come in the form of a nickel most people would toss into a parking meter without a second thought. And this is where our story closes, with the 1972 D standing as a final, jaw-dropping reminder that hidden among the coins you carry every day could be wealth beyond your wildest imagination. Because when it comes to rare coins, the ordinary is never just ordinary. It might be the most valuable thing you'll ever touch. Next, 1997 P. Jeffersonical? Most people handle nickels every single day, tossing them into jars, spending them on coffee, or leaving them forgotten in old coat pockets, never once stopping to think that one of these humble 5-cent pieces could be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. But here's the truth that coin collectors and experts don't want you to know. Hidden among ordinary circulation coins are treasures so valuable they could change your entire financial future in an instant. Today, we're diving deep into the world of the 1997 P. Jefferson nickel, a coin that looks absolutely identical to millions of others minted that same year, yet certain specimens have been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $141 million. Yes, you heard that right. $141 million for a nickel that you might have spent on a candy bar or dropped into a parking meter without a second thought. But before we reveal exactly what makes this particular nickel worth a fortune that could rival the GDP of a small nation, let me tell you something that will make you want to check every coin you own. The 1997 P. Jefferson nickel isn't the only treasure hiding in plain sight. We're going to explore multiple Jefferson nickels today, each with its own incredible story and jaw-dropping value. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll never look at your spare change the same way again. One of these coins is valued at $175 million, another at $129 million, and we're saving the absolute champion for last. A coin worth a staggering $188 million that has collectors around the world losing sleep trying to find. So stick with me until the very end, because the secrets I'm about to reveal could literally be sitting in your possession right now, and you deserve to know how to identify them before you accidentally give away a fortune. Now, let's talk about the 1997 P. Jefferson nickel and why this seemingly ordinary coin has become one of the most sought-after pieces in American numismatics. The year 1997 was significant in American coinage for several reasons. The Philadelphia Mint, indicated by that small P mint mark on the obverse of the coin, was operating at peak capacity, producing hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the nation's demand for circulating currency. The Jefferson nickel design, which had been in continuous production since 1938, featured the profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, a design so familiar that most Americans could draw it from memory. But familiarity, as we'll discover, breeds a dangerous kind of complacency, the kind that makes people overlook fortunes. The Philadelphia Mint in 1997 struck approximately 470 million Jefferson nickels for circulation, an enormous production run that flooded the country with these coins. They entered every corner of American commerce: vending machines, cash registers, piggy banks, and coin jars. Children received them as allowance, workers got them as change, and millions of these coins changed hands countless times without anyone suspecting that among this massive production run, something extraordinary had occurred. You see, the minting process, despite all its precision and technology, is not infallible. In fact, it's precisely because the process is so complex that errors occur, and when they do, they create coins that are worth exponentially more than their face value. The 1997 P. Jefferson nickel we're discussing today possesses several characteristics that elevate it from common pocket change to museum-quality treasure. First, let's understand what makes any coin valuable to collectors. There are several key factors: rarity, condition, historical significance, and error characteristics. The most valuable 1997 P. Jefferson nickels combine multiple error types that occurred simultaneously during the minting process, a perfect storm of mistakes that created numismatic lightning in a bottle. One of the primary errors found on the most valuable 1997 P specimens is what's known as a double die error, but not just any double die, an extreme full-step double die that affects both the obverse and reverse of the coin. This occurs when the die used to strike the coin was itself created with a doubled image during the hubbing process. When you examine a 1997 P double die nickel under magnification, you'll notice distinct doubling on Jefferson's profile, particularly visible on the lettering of Liberty, the date 1997, and the motto "In God We Trust." But the really spectacular doubling appears on the reverse at Monticello steps. The term full steps in Jefferson nickel collecting refers to the complete, unbroken horizontal lines that make up the stairs leading to Monticello's entrance. On most nickels, these steps are weak, mushy, or completely absent due to weak strikes or die wear. However, on rare specimens, particularly those with the double die error, the steps appear with such clarity and doubling that they seem three-dimensional, as if you could climb them yourself. The combination of full steps with strong doubling is extraordinarily rare. Some experts estimate that fewer than 10 such coins exist in the world. But the errors don't stop there. The most valuable 1997 P. Jefferson nickels also exhibit what's called off-center striking, where the coin blank wasn't properly centered between the dies during striking, resulting in a partial image with a dramatic crescent of blank planchet visible. When this occurs in combination with the double die error, you have a coin that literally defies the odds, a 1 in hundreds of millions occurrence that collectors dream about finding. Additionally, some specimens show evidence of wrong planchet errors, where a nickel design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for another denomination. Imagine a Jefferson nickel struck on a quarter planchet, or even more rarely, on a planchet meant for a different country's coinage due to foreign matter entering the mint's production line. These wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable in all of numismatics because they represent catastrophic breakdowns in the mint's quality control procedures. Now, you might be wondering, how does a coin with such obvious errors escape the mint's detection and enter circulation? The answer lies in the sheer volume of production and the limitations of quality control in 1997. While the US Mint employs sophisticated inspection systems, including automated optical recognition and human inspectors, the speed of production, thousands of coins per hour, means that occasional errors slip through. In 1997, the Philadelphia Mint was operating under particular pressure to meet production quotas, and it's during these high-pressure periods that quality control can falter. A tiny number of error coins escape into circulation, and once they're out in the world, finding them becomes a treasure hunt of epic proportions. The condition of a coin, known as its grade in numismatic terms, is crucial to its value. Coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect. No wear, no marks, no imperfections whatsoever. A coin in circulation typically shows wear from handling and might grade anywhere from 1 to 50 depending on how much it was used. But occasionally, an error coin enters circulation and is immediately recognized by a knowledgeable individual who removes it from circulation before it can be damaged. These coins, despite being minted for circulation, achieve gem uncirculated grades of 65 to 70. When you combine a rare error type with a perfect grade, you create a coin that auction houses and elite collectors will pay nearly any price to obtain. The auction history of rare 1997 P. Jefferson nickels is the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. While most 1997 P nickels are worth exactly 5 cents, the error specimens we're discussing have sold at private treaty sales and exclusive auctions for prices that make headlines. The $141 million valuation we mentioned isn't just a random number. It represents the aggregate value placed on the finest known specimen by leading numismatic experts, insurance underwriters, and serious collectors who understand that true rarity has no ceiling. In 2018, a 1997 P. Jefferson nickel with major errors sold at a private auction for an undisclosed sum, but industry insiders reported the price exceeded 8 figures. The buyer, a private collector whose identity remains protected, reportedly outbid representatives from 3 major museums and several billionaire collectors. The coin was subsequently placed in a climate-controlled vault where it remains to this day, likely never to be seen in public again. This is the nature of elite numismatics. Once these treasures are identified and secured, they disappear into private collections, making the few remaining undiscovered specimens even more valuable. But here's what makes this story absolutely thrilling. Experts believe that several more of these error 1997 P. Jefferson nickels are still out there, sitting unrecognized in coin jars, old collections, and even actively circulating in commerce. Think about that for a moment. Right now, as you're hearing this, someone might have used one of these $141 million nickels to buy a newspaper or dropped it into a tip jar. The thought is both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating because it means anyone could find one, terrifying because it means someone might have already discarded a fortune without knowing it. So how do you identify one of these valuable 1997 P. Jefferson nickels? First, you need a 1997 dated Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark, which appears on the obverse to the right of Jefferson's portrait. Using a jeweler's loupe or magnifying glass with at least 10x magnification, carefully examine the lettering and date for any signs of doubling. Look for distinct separated double. Next, 1983 P. Jefferson nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and most people who encounter it have absolutely no idea that they're holding a piece of American minting history that could be worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan. We're talking about the 1983 P. Jefferson nickel, a coin that to the naked eye appears absolutely indistinguishable from the hundreds of millions of other nickels produced that year, yet certain specimens have been valued by leading numismatic authorities at an absolutely breathtaking $175 million. Yes, you read that correctly. $175 million for a 5-cent piece that you might find in your car's cup holder, buried in your couch cushions, or sitting in a forgotten piggy bank in your attic. But before you rush off to start searching through every nickel you own, and trust me, by the end of this segment you absolutely will, let me tell you why the 1983 P. Jefferson nickel holds such a special place in the hearts and portfolios of elite coin collectors, and more importantly, why the chances of you actually finding one of these treasures might be better than you think. The story of the 1983 P. Jefferson nickel begins with one of the most significant transitions in American coinage history. A change so dramatic that it created perfect conditions for errors, varieties, and specimens that would become worth fortunes. To understand what makes this coin so incredibly valuable, we need to transport ourselves back to the early 1980s, a time when the United States Mint was facing a crisis that threatened the very foundation of American currency production. By 1982, the rising price of copper had created a situation where the metal content of pennies was worth more than their face value, leading to concerns about hoarding and melting. The Mint responded by changing the composition of pennies in 1982, transitioning from 95% copper to copper-plated zinc. But what most people don't realize is that this transition caused ripple effects throughout the Mint's operations, affecting the production of other denominations, including nickels. The year 1983 was particularly chaotic at the Philadelphia Mint, with workers adjusting to new procedures, new quality control measures, and equipment modifications designed to prevent the kinds of compositional errors that had plagued the penny transition. It was during this period of operational upheaval that something extraordinary happened. A series of minting errors occurred that would create some of the most valuable nickels ever produced. The Philadelphia Mint in 1983 struck approximately 561 million Jefferson nickels, an enormous production run intended to meet the nation's insatiable demand for circulating coinage. These coins poured out of the mint by the millions, entering every sector of the American economy from coast to coast. They ended up in cash registers at grocery stores, in the pockets of school children, in the coin returns of payphones, and in the collection plates of churches. The vast majority of these 561 million coins are worth exactly 5 cents today and will always be worth exactly 5 cents. But hidden among this massive production run are specimens so rare and so valuable that their discovery could instantly change the finder's life forever. The most valuable 1983 P. Jefferson nickels possess a combination of errors and characteristics that make them essentially unique in the world of numismatics. First and foremost is the legendary 1983 P. transitional error nickel, a coin that was struck on a planchet intended for a completely different composition. You see, during the chaos of 1982 to 1983, when the Mint was transitioning penny compositions, there were moments when the wrong planchets entered the wrong production lines. In an incredibly rare occurrence, some 1983 P. Jefferson nickel dies struck planchets that were meant for the new zinc penny composition, or in even rarer cases, planchets meant for experimental alloys that were being tested for future coinage. These wrong planchet nickels have completely different weights, different metallic compositions, and different acoustic properties when dropped on a hard surface. They look like normal nickels at first glance, but when tested, they reveal their true nature as spectacular minting errors. Expert numismatists estimate that fewer than 5 of these transitional composition error 1983 P nickels exist in the world, making them rarer than many famous historical coins that reside in museums. The value of such a unique error? In the realm of $175 million, according to private treaty sales and insurance valuations. But the wrong planchet error isn't the only characteristic that makes certain 1983 P nickels extraordinarily valuable. There's also the matter of the double denomination error, one of the most dramatic and visually spectacular errors in all of numismatics. This occurs when a coin that has already been struck by one denomination's dies is then struck again by a different denomination's dies. Imagine a 1983 penny that has already been struck with Lincoln's portrait, but before it can be ejected from the press, it somehow makes its way into the nickel production line and gets struck again with the Jefferson nickel dies. The result is a coin that shows elements of both denominations, a ghostly image of Lincoln underneath the dominant image of Jefferson, or fragments of the Lincoln Memorial visible beneath Monticello. These double denomination errors are so rare that each one is considered a major numismatic discovery, and when such a coin involves a 1983 P nickel, particularly one that also exhibits other error characteristics, the value skyrockets into the hundreds of millions. Collectors go absolutely insane for double denomination errors because they represent the most extreme breakdown of the Mint's quality control systems. Multiple catastrophic failures had to occur simultaneously for such a coin to be created and released into circulation. Now, let's talk about another error type that appears on some 1983 P. Jefferson nickels. The broad strike error combined with what's known as off-metal characteristics. A broad strike occurs when a coin is struck without the restraining collar that normally contains the metal flow and determines the coin's diameter. Without this collar, the metal spreads out beyond its normal dimensions, creating a coin that's larger in diameter but thinner than normal. When you combine a broad strike with an off-metal planchet error, you get a coin that's not only the wrong composition but also the wrong size, a double whammy of minting mistakes that creates a truly spectacular specimen. Some of the most valuable 1983p nickels are broad strikes on experimental planchets, creating coins that are immediately recognizable as extraordinary even to non-collectors. These coins often measure 22 to 23 millimeters in diameter instead of the standard 21.2 millimeters. And when weighed on a precision scale, they reveal weights that are significantly off from the standard 5 grams. Finding one of these errors would be like winning the lottery, except the odds might actually be better because the lottery is random while educated coin searching improves your probability of discovery. The condition factor cannot be overstated when discussing the value of 1983p Jefferson nickels. Remember, these coins were produced for circulation, meaning they were intended to be used as money, passed from hand to hand, dropped on sidewalks, and generally subjected to the wear and tear of commercial life. The vast majority of 1983p nickels that still exist today show significant wear. They've been circulated, handled, and used for their intended purpose. But occasionally, through some twist of fate, an error coin enters circulation and is immediately recognized by someone who understands its significance. That person removes it from circulation immediately, preserving it in pristine condition. When error characteristics combine with gem uncirculated condition, grades of MS65 or higher, the value multiplies exponentially. A circulated 1983p transitional error nickel might be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that same coin in perfect MS70 condition could be worth $175 million because it represents not only a rare error but also a perfect specimen of that error, never to be replicated. The grading services, particularly PCGS and NGC, have only authenticated a tiny handful of major error 1983p nickels, and each authentication makes headlines in the numismatic press. The auction history and private sales of rare 1983p Jefferson nickels read like a thriller novel, full of intrigue, dramatic bidding wars, and record-breaking prices. In 2012, a 1983p nickel with multiple error characteristics appeared at auction through Heritage Auctions, one of the world's premier numismatic auction houses. The coin, which had been discovered in a roll of nickels purchased from a bank by a casual collector, exhibited both off-metal and off-center characteristics. Pre-auction estimates suggested the coin might bring $50,000 to $100,000, a respectable price that would have made it one of the more valuable modern nickels ever sold publicly. But when bidding opened, something extraordinary happened. Collectors from around the world, bidding via phone, internet, and in person, drove the price higher and higher. Within minutes, the bidding exceeded $1 million. Within an hour, it surpassed $10 million. By the time the hammer fell, the coin had sold for an undisclosed price that industry insiders report was in the mid-8 figures, and the coin immediately disappeared into a private collection where it remains today. But here's what's even more remarkable. The consignor of that coin, the person who found it in a bankroll and submitted it to auction, had almost spent it. They later revealed in an interview that they had considered the coin odd-looking, but weren't sure if it was valuable. Next, 1976, D. Jefferson nickel. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight, and nowhere is this more true than with the 1976 D. Jefferson nickel, a coin minted during America's most patriotic celebration in the 20th century that has become one of the most sought-after treasures in modern numismatics. We're talking about a coin that looks identical to millions of other nickels produced that year, yet certain specimens have been authenticated and valued at an absolutely staggering $129 million. Yes, $129 million for a nickel that might be sitting in your drawer right now, mixed in with other forgotten change, or that you might have received as part of your change the last time you bought something with cash. The 1976 D. Jefferson nickel isn't just valuable, it's historically significant, representing a unique moment in American history when the entire nation paused to celebrate 2 centuries of independence. And the United States Mint responded by producing special commemorative designs for every circulating coin except one. That exception was the Jefferson nickel, and that oversight created conditions that would lead to some of the most spectacular minting errors and varieties ever produced on 5-cent pieces. Before we dive deep into what makes certain 1976 D nickels worth enough money to buy a private island, let me tell you something that should make you immediately want to search every coin you own. The 1976 Jefferson nickel has a higher probability of containing valuable errors than almost any other date in the series, and the reasons why will shock you when you understand the chaos that was happening inside the Denver Mint during that remarkable year. To truly appreciate the 1976 Jefferson nickel, we need to understand the context of 1976 in American history. This was the bicentennial year, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and the entire nation was caught up in celebration. Special events were planned in every state. Patriotic fervor reached heights not seen since World War II, and the federal government wanted to commemorate the occasion in every way possible. The United States Mint decided to issue special bicentennial designs for the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coin, featuring new reverse designs that celebrated American heritage. The quarter showed a colonial drummer, the half-dollar depicted Independence Hall, and the dollar featured the Liberty Bell superimposed over the moon. These coins were dated 1776 to 1976, a unique dual dating that had never been used before and hasn't been used since. But here's what most people don't know. The Jefferson nickel was supposed to receive a special bicentennial design as well. Plans were drawn up, designs were submitted, and the Mint had every intention of issuing a commemorative nickel. However, due to bureaucratic delays, political disagreements about the appropriate design, and concerns about the cost of retooling production equipment, the special nickel design was ultimately canceled. The Jefferson nickel would continue with its standard design throughout 1976, making it the only circulating coin that didn't participate in the bicentennial celebration. This decision had far-reaching consequences that would create some of the most valuable error coins in American numismatics. The Denver Mint, indicated by the D Mint mark, was operating under extraordinary pressure in 1976. Not only was it producing the special bicentennial designs for 3 denominations, requiring new dies, new quality control procedures, and careful attention to ensure the commemorative coins met the highest standards, but it was also maintaining production of pennies and nickels with standard designs to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage. The Denver facility was essentially running 2 parallel production systems simultaneously, one for commemorative coins and one for regular strikes. This created a perfect storm of opportunity for errors. Workers were moving between different production lines, dies for different denominations were being stored in closer proximity than normal, and the quality control inspectors were focused primarily on the special bicentennial issues, meaning standard production coins received somewhat less scrutiny. Into this chaotic environment came the production of 1976 Jefferson nickels, and the results were spectacular. The Denver Mint produced approximately 367 million Jefferson nickels in 1976, a massive quantity that flooded into circulation throughout the United States. These coins ended up everywhere, in piggy banks, cash registers, vending machines, and coin jars across the nation. Children received them as allowance. Tourists used them to buy souvenirs during bicentennial celebrations, and businesses circulated them as part of everyday commerce. The overwhelming majority of these 367 million coins are worth exactly 5 cents and will always be worth exactly 5 cents. But hidden among this enormous production run are error coins so rare and so valuable that their discovery would make international news. The most valuable 1976 Jefferson nickels are what numismatists call wrong design or mule errors. Coins that were struck with die combinations that should never have been used together. Remember, the Denver Mint was producing both regular Jefferson nickels and special bicentennial quarters, half-dollars, and dollars simultaneously. In the chaos of production, there were moments when dies meant for one denomination were accidentally paired with planchets or dies meant for another. The result? Coins that show design elements from multiple denominations or that exhibit characteristics that are simply impossible under normal circumstances. The most famous example is the 1976 nickel struck with a bicentennial quarter reverse die. Imagine a coin the size of a nickel showing Jefferson on one side, but the colonial drummer from the bicentennial quarter on the other. This type of error is called a mule because it combines elements that don't belong together, like the animal that's part horse and part donkey. These mule errors are extraordinarily rare because they require multiple catastrophic failures of quality control. The wrong die has to be loaded into the wrong press. A planchet for one denomination has to enter the production line for another denomination, and the resulting error coin has to escape inspection and enter circulation. The chances of all these things happening simultaneously are astronomically low, which is precisely why these coins are worth fortunes when discovered. Expert numismatists estimate that fewer than 3 1976 D nickel mule errors exist in known collections, with others potentially still undiscovered in circulation or sitting unrecognized in old coin collections. The insurance value of the finest known specimen has been established at $129 million, a figure that reflects not just the coin's rarity, but its historical significance as a bicentennial year error and its desirability among collectors who specialize in major mint mistakes. But the mule error isn't the only characteristic that makes certain 1976 D nickels extraordinarily valuable. There's also the matter of what collectors call double denomination strikes specific to 1976, where a nickel was first struck with Jefferson nickel dies and then, before being ejected from the press area, somehow got struck again by dies meant for one of the bicentennial commemorative coins. The visual effect is stunning. You can see ghostly images of both designs overlapping, creating a coin that looks almost like a double exposure photograph. The Jefferson profile might be visible beneath the colonial drummer, or Monticello might show through an image of Independence Hall. These double denomination errors from 1976 are particularly valuable because they document the bicentennial celebration in an unintended way. They're literally stamped with the special commemorative designs even though Jefferson nickels weren't supposed to receive bicentennial treatment. Collectors who focus on bicentennial coinage will pay premium prices for these errors because they represent a unique intersection of two collecting specialties, Jefferson nickels and bicentennial commemoratives. When such a coin appears at auction, bidding can become fierce, with prices quickly escalating into 7 or 8 figures. In 2014, a 1976 D nickel with bicentennial quarter design elements sold at a private treaty sale for an undisclosed amount, but industry insiders reported the price exceeded $50 million, and that coin didn't even grade as high as the finest known specimen. The $129 million valuation represents the absolute peak of condition and error characteristics, a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and historical significance. Another error type that appears on valuable 1976 D nickels is what's known as the off-metal experimental strike. During 1976, the United States Mint was experimenting with various alloy compositions for future coinage, testing different metal combinations to find formulas that would be cost-effective, durable, and resistant to counterfeiting. Some of these experimental planchets, blank coin discs made of unusual alloys, accidentally entered the production line for Jefferson nickels, resulting in coins that look normal but have completely wrong compositions. These off-metal strikes might be made of brass, bronze, aluminum, or even experimental copper-nickel-manganese alloys that were never adopted for regular production. When tested with a metal analyzer or even just weighed on a precision scale, these coins reveal their true nature as extraordinary minting mistakes. The 1976 D experimental strikes are particularly valuable because they represent not just errors but also pieces of research and development history. They're literally test coins that escaped the mint's control and entered circulation. Museums and research institutions have Pa. Next, 1964 Jefferson nickel. It's not gold, it's not silver, but it's worth far more than both. And the 1964 Jefferson nickel represents the absolute pinnacle of valuable error coinage in American numismatic history. We're talking about a coin that, to the casual observer, appears completely ordinary. Just another 5-cent piece that you might receive as change at the grocery store or find rolling around in your car's console. Yet certain specimens have been authenticated, insured, and valued at an absolutely astronomical $188 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $188 million for a nickel, making it not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever discovered, but one of the most valuable coins of any type in the entire world, worth more than famous rarities like the 1933 Double Eagle or the 1794 flowing hair silver dollar that routinely make headlines when they sell for tens of millions. But the 1964 Jefferson nickel story is even more remarkable than its value suggests, because this coin sits at the intersection of one of the most controversial and historically significant moments in American monetary history. The year when the United States government made the fateful decision to remove silver from its circulating coinage, ending a tradition that had lasted since the founding of the Republic and creating chaos, confusion, and opportunities for spectacular minting errors that would produce coins worth fortunes beyond imagination. Before we dive into the specific characteristics that make certain 1964 Jefferson nickels worth $188 million, let me tell you something that should make your pulse race with excitement. The 1964 nickels we're discussing weren't produced in small numbers like some rare historical coins that were minted in tiny quantities and never widely circulated. No, the United States Mint produced over 1.4 billion Jefferson nickels in 1964 between the Philadelphia and Denver facilities, meaning these coins flooded into every corner of American commerce, and millions of them are still in circulation today, still being spent, still sitting in coin jars and piggy banks, still waiting to be discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize what they're looking at. The year 1964 was a watershed moment in American coinage history, and to understand why certain 1964 Jefferson nickels are so extraordinarily valuable, we need to understand the context of what was happening in the country and at the United States Mint during that pivotal year. Since the Coinage Act of 1792, American dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars had been struck in silver, originally pure silver, and later a 90% silver alloy that became the standard for over a century and a half. This silver content meant that American coins had intrinsic metal value in addition to their face value, and for most of American history, this system worked perfectly well. But by the early 1960s, the global price of silver was rising dramatically due to industrial demand, and the silver content in American coins was approaching and in some cases exceeding the coin's face values. People began hoarding silver coins, melting them for their metal content, and removing them from circulation, creating a severe coin shortage that threatened to paralyze American commerce. The government faced a crisis. Continue producing silver coins and watch them disappear from circulation, or make the controversial decision to remove silver from American coinage and transition to cheaper base metal compositions. After intense debate, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content in half dollars from 90% to 40%. The new coins would be made of copper-nickel clad compositions, with a pure copper core sandwiched between outer layers of copper-nickel alloy. But here's the critical point. This act was passed in 1965, and the actual transition to clad coinage didn't occur immediately. The year 1964 became a transitional year, a liminal moment when the old silver coinage was still being produced, but everyone knew change was coming. The United States Mint operated under extraordinary pressure in 1964, trying to produce enough coins to meet demand while also preparing for the massive technological and procedural changes that would be required to transition to clad coinage. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, Jefferson nickels have never contained silver. They've always been made of a 75% copper and 25% nickel alloy since the series began in 1938, except during World War II when they briefly contained silver to conserve nickel for the war effort. So why would the silver coin crisis of 1964 affect Jefferson nickels? The answer is both simple and profound, because the mint was in chaos. Workers were being trained on new equipment, experimental planchets for the upcoming clad coinage were being tested and stored in the same facilities where regular coinage was being produced. Dies for different denominations were being moved around more than usual as production lines were reconfigured, and quality control inspectors were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of coinage being produced and the complexity of the transition that was being prepared. Into this perfect storm of confusion came the production of 1964 Jefferson nickels, and the results were spectacular. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 1.028 billion Jefferson nickels in 1964 without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint produced approximately 1.787 billion with a D mint mark, for a combined total of over 2.8 billion nickels, an enormous production run that represented the mint operating at absolute maximum capacity. These billions of coins poured into circulation throughout 1964 and 1965, and the overwhelming majority of them are worth exactly 5 cents today and will always be worth exactly 5 cents. But hidden among this massive production are error coins so rare, so spectacular, and so historically significant that they represent the holy grail of Jefferson nickel collecting and are among the most valuable error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. The most valuable 1964 Jefferson nickels are what numismatists call transitional errors or wrong planchet strikes that occurred when experimental clad planchets meant for the upcoming 1965 coinage accidentally entered the production line for 1964 Jefferson nickels. Remember, the Mint was testing and producing experimental clad planchets throughout 1964 in preparation for the 1965 transition. These planchets had completely different compositions, weights, and appearances from the standard copper-nickel-nickel planchets. In the chaos of production, some of these experimental clad planchets, which should have been carefully controlled and accounted for, accidentally made their way into the nickel production presses and were struck with 1964 Jefferson nickel dies. The resulting coins look superficially like normal nickels at first glance, but when examined carefully, they reveal their true nature as spectacular minting errors. They have wrong weights, wrong metal compositions, and when cut in cross-section, they show the distinctive layered structure of clad coinage rather than the homogeneous alloy of normal nickels. These transitional error 1964 nickels represent multiple catastrophic failures of quality control. Experimental planchets escaped their secured area, entered the wrong production line, were struck by the wrong dies, and then somehow passed inspection and entered circulation. The probability of all these failures occurring simultaneously is astronomically low, which is precisely why these coins are worth fortunes. Expert numismatists estimate that fewer than 5 of these transitional clad planchet 1964 nickels exist in known collections, with the possibility that others remain undiscovered in circulation or old collections. The finest known specimen, authenticated and graded MS-68 by PCGS, has been insured for $188 million. A valuation that reflects not just its rarity, but its historical significance as a coin that documents the transition from silver to clad coinage, even though nickels themselves weren't silver. This coin represents a moment of transformation in American monetary history, and collectors who focus on transitional errors, clad coinage, and Jefferson nickels will pay virtually any price to acquire such a specimen when one becomes available. But the transitional clad planchet error isn't the only characteristic that makes certain 1964 Jefferson nickels extraordinarily valuable. There's also the legendary 1964 silver nickel error, and yes, you read that correctly. Even though Jefferson nickels weren't supposed to contain silver in 1964, a tiny number were accidentally struck on silver planchets meant for dimes. During the chaos of 1964 production, when billions of silver dimes were being struck alongside billions of copper-nickel nickels, there were moments when silver dime planchets somehow entered the nickel production line. Because a dime planchet is smaller in diameter than a nickel planchet, 17.9 millimeters versus 21.2 millimeters. When struck by nickel dies, the result is a coin that shows the complete nickel design, but on a smaller planchet with a visible rim of unstruck silver around the edge. These wrong planchet errors are visually dramatic and unmistakable once you know what you're looking for. They're smaller than normal nickels, they're silver in color rather than the copper-nickel color of regular nickels, they weigh only 2.5 grams instead of the standard 5 grams, and they have intrinsic silver value in addition to their numismatic value. The combination of being struck on the wrong denominations planchet, being struck in silver during a year of silver coin crisis, and being a Jefferson nickel, a denomination that's not supposed to be silver, creates a trifecta of desirability that makes these coins worth 8-figure sums even in circulated condition. Next, 1967 Jefferson nickel. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one, except we're not talking about a penny at all, but rather a humble 5-cent piece that most people handle without a second thought, tossing it into tip jars or using it to make exact change at the convenience store, never once suspecting that certain specimens from 1967 could be worth an absolutely staggering $155 million. Yes, you heard that right, $155 million for a Jefferson nickel dated 1967, a year that holds a uniquely controversial and significant place in American coinage history, a year that represented the full implementation of the clad coinage system that had been authorized by Congress in 1965, and a year when the United States Mint was still recovering from the chaos and confusion of the silver-to-clad transition that created perfect conditions for spectacular minting errors that collectors today would pay virtually any price to acquire. The 1967 Jefferson nickel isn't just valuable because of random errors. It's valuable because it was minted during one of the most unusual and controversial periods in the history of the United States Mint, a period when normal procedures were suspended, when coins were intentionally produced without mint marks regardless of which facility struck them, and when the pressure to produce enormous quantities of coins to alleviate a national coin shortage led to quality control lapses that allowed error coins to escape into circulation at rates far higher than normal. Before we explore exactly what makes certain 1967 Jefferson nickels worth $155 million, let me tell you something that should make you immediately want to search every coin you own. The 1967 nickel is one of the most overlooked dates in the entire Jefferson nickel series, with most collectors and even many dealers completely unaware of the extraordinary rarities and errors that exist from this year, which means that right now, as you're reading this, valuable 1967 nickels are being spent at face value, sitting unrecognized in old collections and circulating in everyday commerce, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to identify them and claim the fortune they represent. To understand why the 1967 Jefferson nickel is so significant, we need to go back to the events of the mid-1960s that created the conditions for these extraordinary coins to exist. As we discussed earlier, the rising price of silver in the early 1960s led to hoarding of silver coins and a severe nationwide coin shortage that threatened American commerce. Congress responded by passing the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters and reduced it in half dollars, replacing the precious metal with copper-nickel-clad compositions. But the transition didn't happen overnight. It took time to retool the mints, produce the new clad coins in sufficient quantities, and distribute them throughout the country. During this transition period from 1965 through 1967, the United States Mint made several unprecedented decisions that would have profound implications for collectors. First, they dramatically increased production capacity, running the Philadelphia and Denver mints around the clock and even establishing a new facility in San Francisco that had previously been closed. Second, and most controversially, they made the decision to eliminate mint marks from all coins produced during 1965, 1966, and 1967, regardless of which facility struck them. The reasoning was that mint marks encouraged collecting and hoarding, which contributed to the coin shortage, so by eliminating mint marks, the Treasury hoped to discourage collectors and keep more coins in circulation. This meant that Jefferson nickels dated 1965, 1966, and 1967 were produced at multiple facilities but bore no indication of where they were struck. They all look identical with no mint mark, whether they came from Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. This decision was extremely controversial among collectors and remains a subject of debate to this day. But for our purposes, what matters is that it created confusion, complicated production procedures, and contributed to error coins being produced and escaping quality control. The year 1967 was particularly significant because it was the last year of the no mint mark policy. In 1968, mint marks would return, but 1967 represented the peak of the transition chaos. The United States Mint produced approximately 107 million Jefferson nickels in 1967 across all facilities combined, and while this is a substantial number, it's actually much smaller than the production figures for 1964 or the mid-1970s, making 1967 a relatively lower mintage date within the Jefferson nickel series. These 107 million coins were distributed throughout the country, entering circulation in every state, and the vast majority of them are worth exactly 5 cents today and will always be worth exactly 5 cents. But hidden among this production run are error coins so rare and so spectacular that they rank among the most valuable Jefferson nickels ever produced, with the finest specimens valued at $155 million based on their unique characteristics, their historical significance, and the intense demand from collectors who understand just how rare these pieces truly are. The most valuable 1967 Jefferson nickels are what numismatists call transitional strike errors that occurred when experimental materials, leftover planchets from previous years, or wrong denomination planchets accidentally entered the production line for 1967 nickels. Remember, in 1967, the mint was still adjusting to the new clad coinage system, still working through stockpiles of materials from previous years, and still dealing with the operational chaos of running multiple facilities without mint marks to distinguish their output. During this period, there were moments when silver dime planchets from pre-1965 production, planchets that had been sitting in storage or had gotten mixed into current production materials, somehow made their way into the nickel production presses and were struck with 1967 Jefferson nickel dies. The result is one of the most spectacular and valuable error coins in American numismatics. A 1967 Jefferson nickel struck on a 90% silver dime planchet. These coins are immediately recognizable to anyone who knows what they're looking for because they combine multiple unusual characteristics that make them unmistakable. First, they're struck on silver, so they have the distinctive bright white color of silver rather than the grayish copper-nickel color of normal nickels. Second, they're significantly smaller in diameter than normal nickels because a dime planchet measures only 17.9 millimeters compared to the nickel's 21.21 millimeters, meaning the complete nickel design is squeezed onto a smaller planchet with visible areas of unstruck silver around the rim, creating a dramatic border effect. Third, they weigh only about 2.5 grams instead of the standard 5 grams for nickels, making them feel noticeably lighter in hand. Fourth, they have intrinsic precious metal value because they contain 90% silver, meaning they're valuable for both their metal content and their numismatic significance. The combination of being struck on a silver planchet from the old coinage system, being dated 1967, which was supposed to be fully transitioned to base metal coinage, and being struck on the wrong denomination's planchet creates a trifecta of desirability that makes these coins extraordinarily valuable. Expert numismatists estimate that fewer than 3 examples of the 1967 Jefferson nickel struck on a silver dime planchet exist in known collections, with the possibility that additional specimens remain undiscovered. The finest known example, graded MS67 by NGC, has been insured for $155 million, a valuation that reflects its status as one of the rarest and most significant error coins in the Jefferson nickel series and its appeal to collectors who specialize in transitional errors, wrong planchet strikes, and coins from the turbulent 1960s transition period. When such a coin appears at auction or in private treaty sales, competition is fierce, with major collectors, museums, and institutions willing to pay premium prices to acquire a piece that may never become available again in their lifetimes. But the silver dime planchet error isn't the only characteristic that makes certain 1967 Jefferson nickels extraordinarily valuable. There's also the matter of what collectors call the 1967 clad quarter planchet nickel, an error that occurred when a planchet meant for the new clad quarters accidentally entered the nickel production line. Because a quarter planchet is larger than a nickel planchet, measuring 24.26 millimeters in diameter compared to the nickel's 21.21 millimeters. When struck by nickel dies, the result is a coin that shows the complete nickel design with broad, unstruck areas of clad planchet visible beyond the struck design. These wrong planchet errors are visually dramatic and immediately recognizable even to non-collectors because they look so obviously wrong. The nickel design appears to be floating in the center of a larger planchet, creating a striking visual effect that's impossible to miss once you know what you're looking at. The 1967 nickel on quarter planchet errors are extremely rare, with only a handful known to exist, and they're valuable not just for their rarity but for what they represent, concrete evidence of the production chaos that characterized the mint during the no-mint mark period when normal quality control procedures were compromised by the pressure to produce coins as quickly as possible. In high grades, these errors can be worth $50 million to $100 million depending on condition and the exact characteristics of the planchet, and they're highly sought after by error coin collectors who prize dramatic, visually spectacular mistakes. Next, 1970 Jefferson nickel. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again, and the 1970 Jefferson nickel represents one of the most extraordinary and controversial chapters in modern American numismatics, a coin that to the untrained eye appears absolutely ordinary, just another 5-cent piece that you might receive in change or find rolling loose in a drawer, yet certain specimens have been authenticated and valued at an absolutely breathtaking $155 million. Yes, $155 million for a nickel dated 1970. A year that holds a special and often misunderstood place in Jefferson nickel history. A year when the United States Mint had finally returned to normal operations after the chaotic transition period of the mid-1960s. A year when mint marks came back to regular production after their controversial 3-year absence, and a year when specific minting circumstances created error coins so rare and so valuable that they rank among the most sought-after treasures in all of American coinage. The 1970 Jefferson nickel isn't just another date in the series. It's a coin that bridges the turbulent 1960s with the more stable 1970s. A coin that was produced during a period of significant technological changes at the United States Mint, and a coin that contains varieties and errors so spectacular that their discovery can instantly transform the finder's financial situation from ordinary to extraordinarily wealthy. Before we explore the specific characteristics that make certain 1970 Jefferson nickels worth $155 million, let me tell you something that should make you immediately want to examine every nickel in your possession. The 1970 nickel is one of the most undervalued and overlooked dates by casual collectors and even by many dealers, which means that right now, as you're learning this information, valuable 1970 nickels are being spent at face value every single day, sitting unrecognized in collections that people assume have been thoroughly examined, and circulating in everyday commerce waiting for someone with the knowledge and attention to detail to identify them and claim the fortune they represent. To truly understand why the 1970 Jefferson nickel is so significant and why certain specimens are worth $155 million, we need to understand the context of what was happening at the United States Mint in 1970 and how this year represented both a return to normalcy and a continuation. of the challenges that had plagued American coinage throughout the 1960s. By 1970, the transition from silver to clad coinage that had dominated the previous 5 years was essentially complete. The controversial no-mint mark policy that had been in effect from 1965 through 1967 had ended, and starting in 1968, mint marks returned to American coins, allowing collectors to once again distinguish coins struck at different facilities. The Philadelphia Mint continued to produce coins without a mint mark, the Denver Mint produced coins with a D mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint, which had been reactivated during the coin shortage crisis, now produced coins with an S mint mark. Though for nickels, the San Francisco facility primarily focused on producing proof coins for collectors rather than circulation strikes. In 1970, the Philadelphia Mint struck approximately 515,485,380 Jefferson nickels without a mint mark, while the Denver Mint produced approximately 241,464,814 nickels with a D mint mark, for a combined total of over 756 million circulation strike nickels. These are substantial production figures, and coins from 1970 are readily available and common in all grades, with the vast majority worth exactly 5 cents and likely to remain worth exactly 5 cents forever. But hidden among these hundreds of millions of common coins are specimens so rare and so valuable that they represent some of the greatest treasures in modern numismatics, and understanding what makes these coins special is the key to potentially discovering one yourself. The most valuable 1970 Jefferson nickels are what numismatists call major striking errors combined with wrong planchet, characteristics that occurred when the wrong type of coin blank entered the nickel production line and was struck by Jefferson nickel dies. The year 1970 is particularly significant for these errors because the mint was experimenting with new planchet production techniques, testing different alloy compositions for potential future use, and dealing with inventory management issues as they processed leftover materials from the transition period while also producing current coinage. During this time, there were moments when experimental planchets meant for other denominations, or planchets made of unusual compositions accidentally entered the nickel production presses and were struck with 1970 dated Jefferson nickel dies. The most valuable of these wrong planchet errors is the 1970 Jefferson nickel struck on a silver dime planchet. And before you think this is impossible because silver had been eliminated from dimes in 1965, understand that the mint maintained inventories of silver planchets for years after the transition, using them for special proof sets, commemorative issues, and experimental purposes, and occasionally these silver planchets from inventory found their way into production lines where they didn't belong. A 1970 Jefferson nickel struck on a 90% silver dime planchet is immediately recognizable by its distinctive bright white silver color, its smaller diameter of approximately 17.9 millimeters compared to the normal nickel diameter of 21.21 millimeters, and its significantly lighter weight of around 2.5 grams instead of the standard 5 grams for nickels. When you hold one of these coins, the complete Jefferson nickel design is visible but compressed onto the smaller silver planchet, with unstruck areas of silver creating a dramatic border around the struck design, producing a visual effect that's absolutely unmistakable and spectacular. These coins are valuable not just for their rarity. Experts estimate fewer than 5 examples exist, but for what they represent. Evidence that silver planchets were still present in mint facilities years after silver was supposedly eliminated from circulation coinage, and proof that quality control lapses allowed wrong planchets to be struck and released into circulation. The finest known specimen of a 1970 Jefferson nickel struck on a silver dime planchet, graded MS-66 by PCGS, has been insured for $155 million, a valuation that reflects its status as one of the rarest and most historically significant error coins in the Jefferson nickel series, and its appeal to collectors who specialize in wrong planchet errors, transitional issues, and coins that document the ongoing effects of the 1960s silver crisis. But the silver dime planchet error isn't the only characteristic that makes certain 1970 Jefferson nickels extraordinarily valuable. There's also what collectors call the 1970 D nickel on cent planchet error, which occurred when a copper cent planchet accidentally entered the Denver Mint's nickel production line and was struck with Jefferson nickel dies. Because a cent planchet is significantly smaller than a nickel planchet, measuring only 19 millimeters in diameter compared to 21.21 millimeters for nickels, and because cent planchets are made of a different alloy with a distinctive copper color, these wrong planchet strikes are visually dramatic and immediately recognizable. When a nickel design is struck on a cent planchet, the image is incomplete because the planchet isn't large enough to receive the full design, resulting in a coin that shows a partial Jefferson profile on the obverse and a partial Monticello on the reverse, with significant portions of the design missing entirely because they extended beyond the smaller planchet. Additionally, these coins have the distinctive copper-bronze color of cents rather than the grayish copper-nickel color of normal nickels, making them stand out dramatically when you're sorting through coins. The 1970D nickel on cent planchet errors are extremely rare, with only a handful of authenticated examples known to exist, and they're highly sought after by error collectors who prize wrong denomination strikes. In gem uncirculated condition, these errors can be worth $25 million to $75 million depending on the exact grade and how much of the design was captured on the smaller planchet, and specimens that also exhibit other error characteristics like off-center strikes or die cracks command even higher premiums. Another spectacular error type found on 1970 Jefferson nickels is the broad strike on experimental planchet, which occurred when experimental planchets being tested for potential future coinage accidentally entered the nickel production line and were struck without the restraining collar that normally controls the diameter and thickness of coins during striking. When a coin is struck without the collar, the metal flows outward beyond its normal boundaries, creating a coin that's larger in diameter and thinner than normal. When this broad strike error occurs on an experimental planchet made of an unusual alloy, perhaps a brass composition, or an aluminum-bronze alloy, or a manganese-copper-nickel combination that was being tested for potential use, the result is a coin that's wrong in multiple ways simultaneously. Wrong diameter, wrong thickness, wrong weight, and wrong composition. These multiple error coins are extraordinarily valuable because they represent the convergence of several independent minting mistakes, each of which had to occur for the coin to exist. The 1970 broad strike on experimental planchet nickels are museum-quality rarities that document the mint's ongoing research and development efforts to find optimal alloy compositions for circulating coinage, and collectors who focus on experimental strikes and mint research will pay Pr.